Hello, and welcome to Learning the Social Sciences. We're now to part 3 of the French Revolution, or really just the presentation on Napoleon Bonaparte, the leader of France. For some people, at the end of the French Revolution, thus ending it, or for some people, continuing on the revolutionary ideals while also conquering much of Europe. So let's jump right into this. Who is this Napoleon? Napoleon is not French. He's Corsican. He's from the island right down off the coast of France and Italy. And his parents were actually anti French fighters. So Corsica used to belong to Italy and then was taken by France. And his parents were guerrilla warriors going against the French troops there and the French government. However, once they started having kids, I mean, being really good guerrilla warriors while having kids doesn't really work that well. And so they then left the mountains and went and settled on down with their children. And eventually, Napoleon's father got a job for the French government, which did not sit well with Napoleon because he kind of saw his father as a traitor to his own cause. And what Napoleon really didn't like was when his father sent him to France to go to a military academy. Now, Napoleon hated his time there, to go away to a boarding school, away from his family, but also to go to a military academy. He was picked on. He was a kid with an accent. He had different mannerisms, different other things, and it just wasn't a great experience. But man, oh man, was he good at school in terms of learning the things that would enable him to become a great general. So, when the French Revolution started, Napoleon really saw a lot of great things about it with throwing out the old regime, the ancient regime. And Napoleon rose through the ranks very quickly during the French Revolution in the military because of all of the people, the nobility that were fleeing and leaving the country. And so Napoleon was able to rise up through very quickly. And he had successes in Italy, also in the southern areas of France. From 1796 to 1797, he conquered most of northern Italy for France. He saved a port city that the British had taken by using, again, his cannons. What you are going to learn about is he is great at artillery. He is great at setting up his cannons to be able to take out the enemy because he foresees the movement of the enemy forces, which is really good if you can time your cannons to continually hit the enemy wherever they move. And then near the end of 1797, moving on to 1798, he started to get involved into politics. Um, he also, while he was in northern Italy, moved to suppress religious orders and serfdom and limit those age old noble privileges that he saw still in Italy. So, Napoleon Bonaparte leads a successful coup d'etat of the French Directory, the Directory being that small group of individuals of the executive branch heading up the government, on September 4th, 1797. So he goes in to take over the directory and he's getting arrested right away. And then his brother goes and places a knife at his neck and says, if my brother was doing this for his own ambition, for his own power, I would be the first to kill him. However, he's doing this for the good of France. We need an executive branch, a strong executive branch. And if we can have the people vote for this, a plebiscite, then we will know truly the voice of the people. So let's put this new position up to a vote. And they do, they let him go, they don't arrest him, and the French people vote for Napoleon. So this is something moving forward for the revolution. So the directory is out, Napoleon's in, but the wars continue on. Now, in part two, I talked about how a war broke out with France, and they have a whole bunch of different enemies from a whole bunch of different fronts for numerous reasons fighting against them. But this is the one time that you could take out the big land superpower of France in Europe by having all of these other guys go at them all at once. But although in the initial years they were having a lot of hardship, they are now starting to turn it around and are starting to have some victories. Now, at the exact same time that we have this rising star of Napoleon militarily, we have a rising Navy star, and that is going to be this guy by the name of Horatio Nelson. So we're going to see actually two great military men rising up at the exact same time. Just one is really great at the seas, and one is really great at land battles. So Napoleon's armies go in again to Italy and to Switzerland. They defeat Austrian and Sardinian armies there. And then Napoleon has the great idea to go and invade Egypt to weaken Britain. He's going to go and cut off Britain, possibly with the Suez Canal and other things, and to reduce their power, and also to take an area where they get a lot of cotton from another area. So he goes on down there, and he defeats Egypt very quickly in the Battle of the Pyramids. And with this, he then starts to move up the coast of the Levant. So that would be going through what is modern day Israel, Lebanon, Syria. Um, because he cannot leave Egypt anymore by the seas because, Horatio Nelson has showed up and Napoleon is stuck there. He tries to go on up, but the Ottomans are able to stop him in Syria. And so he and his forces get pushed back down into Egypt. And eventually, Napoleon just sneaks out of Egypt when the time is good and goes on back to France to continue his job there. However, while they were in Egypt, the Rosetta Stone was discovered. The Rosetta Stone is, as you can see by this picture, a stone where you have the same text written in three different languages. And this is what is going to help us to be able to translate hieroglyphics. If it wasn't for this stone, we still might not know how to translate hieroglyphics. But since we knew the other languages on it, we were able to now decipher that language, that written language. So Napoleon goes and passes the Constitution of Year 8 because we are in the French calendar and they did a reset. But this is a constitution that's written in 1799 by going by the calendar that was used prior to the start of the revolution. So Napoleon pushed aside one of the directors, Abbe Sieyès, aside politically, and he then goes and pushes to become the one-man ruler, the First Consul, which is the title that he has taken from Julius Caesar. He got rid of the elected assembly, appointing a senate instead, something also that you would think would be Roman. And he moved to get this all approved by the voters, a vote by the people. And the people love Napoleon. He's victorious in basically everything he does. And he quells the violence on the streets of Paris by, well, bringing in his cannons again and shooting at the mobs if they decided to meet and get violent. So he actually addresses the violence in Rome, sorry, not Rome, Paris, finally, and quells it. So people vote for him. They go at him. So a lot of people assume that when the Councilment is proclaimed and Napoleon becomes a leader, kind of with dictatorial powers, that it is the end of the revolution. But Napoleon himself loved a lot of ideals from the revolution and will actually enact a lot of them. So that's why there's this debate as to when does the revolution end? Does it end with Napoleon taking power, or does it end when Napoleon finally falls and the monarchy is restored afterwards? Anyway, Napoleon acted more like an absolute ruler than an elected politician, and third estate members and peasants supported the council and they supported Napoleon as they finally achieved the goals that they sought to attain at the very beginning of the revolution. Now, going back to the war, we have breakout and fighting again from 1799 to 1801. It is the War of the Second Coalition. Although Napoleon was victorious in Egypt, he was defeated in Syria and his troops returned to Egypt, as I explained. And again, Napoleon goes and fights in Italy against the Austrians. Napoleon liked to always show up first to a battlefield, pick it, and allow the other troops to come in. That way, he has picked the best position. And if you're in northern Italy or in Austria, you have plenty of hills and mountains to be able to set up your artillery on. And so he just always loved this setup. And of course, he again defeats the Austrians. And they sign a treaty. And at this time, Britain removes itself for the war. They kind of know that things are going to start back up again. They sign the Treaty of Amiens, but they're kind of like, this is just a temporary pause. Don't be thinking that this is all over. So Napoleon then goes and reestablishes Christianity in 1801. He has an agreement with Pope Pius VII that the Pope was reluctant to accept, but happy to actually get the Catholic Church back into France. Napoleon wanted to use the church and the clergy to help his regime, and he kind of negotiated some things. He had the French government nominate the bishops, who were then to be vested by the popes, and the bishops would appoint then the priests, which then ended that civil constitution of the clergy. Catholicism was declared the religion of the majority of the people in France. They kind of acknowledged what was there. However, still, the state maintained its authority over the church. They did not want to have them be totally free and independent and doing as they wish. We then have the Napoleonic Code, or the Civil Code of 1804, getting passed. So this granted equality to all citizens before the law. Conservative attitudes, though, are still going to remain with women. It's not like they're going to be going out and having a whole bunch of liberté and égalité. No, we still have a whole bunch of social norms and a whole lot of things that needs to be pushed through the 1800s and 1900s for women to gain more and more rights. But property was distributed among all children, not just the firstborn male. However, if a woman does actually inherit property, she does need her husband's consent to dispose of that property if she or her husband wish to do that. We have the abolition of privileges based on birth, so no more noble rights just because you are born that way. Individuals could choose their occupation of their choice. If you don't want to be a blacksmith, you don't got to be a blacksmith. You can go be a cobbler and make some shoes. Service of the state was now based on ability rather than position or wealth. One could rise up through the ranks regardless of where they actually came from. And somebody that may be this Corsican kid can rise up to be the leader of all of France. Now, of course, Napoleon did come from a noble Corsican family. So it's not like one of those stories like we have in China with the establishment of the Han Dynasty or the Ming Dynasty, where a peasant rises up and establishes a new dynasty. But it does open the door for more social movement and occupational movement, and also right to property and the end of the manor system and obligations, and those feudal dues finally come about, and the peasants rejoice. They are happy. No more feudal dues. So, in terms of other things, Napoleon, chartered the Bank of France. They made peace with the church. They reformed an education system, which you still have being used in Europe today. So, for example, my nephew and niece that live in Germany, they can choose when they get into high school level whether or not they want to kind of go more for a trades job, whether they want to go for more of a university path, and their education then is going to be based off of that. So that's where that is going. Moving on, we have Napoleon going to be emperor. So Napoleon again kind of puts it to the people, and it seems that they want him to become, Napoleon the First. And so he pushes that through and crowns himself the emperor. He actually could have had the Pope crown him or anybody else crown him. But no, he actually picked up the crown himself and put it on himself. And then he picked up his crown and he put it on his wife, Josephine, and made her empress. And he did this because he did not allow anybody else to actually have the power to be able to put it on his head. If the Pope goes and puts it on his head, that means the Pope has this, power and authority even over him, that he can crown him. Now, in terms of the story of Napoleon and Josephine, Josephine had a husband who was killed during the time of the French Revolution, and she had two children. And at this point of time of history, if you are an unwed mother with children, your husband has died, you're a widow, life can be very difficult. So you tended to get married quickly. And Napoleon is a guy who fell madly in puppy love with Josephine. And the two strike up a relationship, and Josephine marries him, but she doesn't necessarily love him like he loves her. She used to joke with her friends about Napoleon. She said that she detested kissing him because, well, Napoleon loved like liver and onions or fried potatoes and onions. He loved onions. And I'm sorry to say, maybe I could agree with Josephine. She was always kissing an onion. And so she complained about that. And she also had affairs, which eventually is going to break Napoleon's heart, because Napoleon is going to find out about it while he is off at war. At that point, though, he is going to kind of break his puppy love. They are going to stay together, but Napoleon is going to then kind of cheat on her a whole lot of times. But they kind of get really honest in their relationship. Things happen, and apparently the relationship got better somehow by all of this. You guys figure it out on your own, but this is the stuff soap operas are made of. So the soap opera of Napoleon and Josephine happened. However, there is going to be an issue because Josephine is older. Now that Napoleon has named himself emperor, he needs an heir. But Josephine is kind of at that point of age where she might not be able to get a baby anymore. And so Napoleon is going to kind of give her a few years to see, does she help produce a child? If not, I'm probably going to have to move on. So we're going to leave the story there, but that thought is in Napoleon's head the whole time. So we go on in now to the War of the Third Coalition, 1805 to 1807. Prussia is going to stay out of this one, and they're going to say that they are going to be neutral. And so instead of going in through Italy, Napoleon does a new thing and starts going into Prussia, the one place that said it wanted to be neutral. But now they're, caught off guard, and Napoleon goes in and takes Berlin. They declared neutrality, but he don't care. In October 1805, Napoleon defeated the Austrians once again on the battlefield in the German state of Bavaria. So, going to the war on the water, France decides that it's going to go take out Britain, and it has combined forces with Spain, and they are going to mount, possibly a naval invasion of Great Britain. Now, Britain's not going to have any part of this, and they have Lord Horatio Nelson, that great admiral on the seas. Yes, he gets seasick all the time and pukes into the water, but he knows what to do with a navy, and he knows the strategies to take out. So if you look at this middle box here on this slide, you will notice that the British are the blue dots and the French and Spanish are the red dots, or the red little boats on here. And what Horatio Nelson is going to do is he's going to be coming in at them almost like an arrow. And he is going to divide their forces, and he's got the wind on his side, which is very important in the 1800s with their ships. And long story short, he wins the battle. And this is the Battle of Trafalgar. However, during the Battle of Trafalgar, Horatio Nelson is mortally wounded. So the guy has one issue is, as you see him in the painting to the right, he used to always fight all of his battles in full regalia. So that outfit that he's wearing there is what he would be fighting in whenever a battle would happen. And I don't know about you, but if I'm a sniper and I see a guy walking around in that outfit, I'm probably going to aim for those nice little, trinkets on the front. They're not trinkets, but, what I can see. And aim for that. And yes, that happens. And Lord Horatio Nelson is taken out. The king rejoices over the win of Trafalgar, but he says that losing Horatio Nelson is kind of this this loss that is too hard to bear for the nation. And so we are going to have Trafalgar Square built in London, and in the middle of Trafalgar Square, we're going to have the Nelson Tower to go and pay homage to him, as he was the one that stopped Napoleon from ever trying to invade Great Britain during this time period. What does Napoleon do after that is, after Trafalgar, is he then focuses again on his land victories, and they continue. He goes and marches way into Austria and has a battle versus the Austrian and Russian forces at the Battle of Austerlitz on December 2nd, 1805. Now, this is on the anniversary of him becoming emperor. And this battle is kind of the battle of Napoleon. He set up his cannons all ahead of time. He actually gave the high ground to the Russians, moving his troops off of there because he knew that then he would have an advantage in knowing how they would approach the battle, and kind of sets them up. So on the morning of the Battle of Austerlitz, there was this haze over the battlefield, and Napoleon had his troops kind of hiding in that and then marching out from there. So it's almost like a ghost army coming out of nowhere, out of the fog. And then he had his cannons blasting at where the Russians were, and he takes them out. I mean, he really wins that battle. And to the point that the Russian Tsar is kind of impressed with that, but then goes and kind of tricks Napoleon in a way. He goes and pretends to make kind of BFF friendship with Napoleon, which, if you know anything about Napoleon at the time period, is the kings and queens of the time do not see Napoleon as an actual emperor. He is not of royal blood to them. Um and so they kind of just ignore him. And this is big when now Tsar Alexander is going and paying attention to him. And so Austria is going to get a horrible deal from the treaty after the Battle of Austerlitz, but Russia's going to get a good deal. So, after this battle, also Napoleon is going to be crowned the King of Italy on May 6, 1805. And the treaty after this battle is going to be the Treaty of Tilsit, which will make peace between Russia and Prussia and France. Napoleon now wants to cut off Great Britain and maybe take them out, starve them out economically. And so he says the continent cannot trade with Great Britain. Now, not all places on the continent are underneath Napoleon's rule. Portugal is not under Napoleon's rule. And Russia, although they say, yeah, we'll follow this, I mean, they lie. They lie right to Napoleon's face. And so we have the Milan Decree of 1807, attempted to stop neutral nations from trading with Great Britain. It totally fails. And this is going to lead to Napoleon's downfall. This whole tariff system, this whole everything. Other nations get mad at Napoleon for saying they can't trade with the United Kingdom, and other places that don't listen because like Portugal doesn't have to listen to them. Napoleon then is going to try to go in and militarily stop them. So we have then that Iberian Peninsula campaign that's going to be going on from 1807 to 1814. Portugal didn't follow along, and so France asked Spain to help support them invading Portugal. Well, the last time France helped Spain, they lost their navy. So Spain refuses. And what does Napoleon do? He invades Spain as well. He takes out the monarchy and goes and puts his brother Joseph on the throne as the King of Spain. But the Spanish don't give up. They continually revolt and have guerrilla warfare go against Napoleon. It's kind of funny that, his parents were guerrilla warriors, and now, coming at him are a whole bunch of guerrilla warriors. Napoleon pulls in about 500,000 troops into Spain. But after 5 years of fighting, the French are forced to leave, mainly because now we have the English fighting and going and helping supply these revolutionaries, these guerrillas, by supporting them via Portugal. So, yeah. Napoleon then also focuses on Russia because Russia has not also followed this campaign to economically starve off Great Britain. And so Napoleon marches towards Russia. He leads his Grand Armée of 614,000 soldiers eastward, and Russia allows them to come on in. Yes, they do the scorched earth policy, where they burn up their crops and they burn up everything so that his soldiers will not have anything as they come in. But they basically just kind of say, keep coming deeper and deeper and deeper into Mother Russia and wait until winter hits, and then we'll welcome you. Napoleon gets to the outskirts of Moscow, and he kind of goes, okay, we're going to weather in Moscow. He camps outside of Moscow in the evening, and what happens? The Tsar orders Moscow to be burnt down. And they do it. They burn down Moscow. Of course, obviously, they had the people retreat first, but they burn down Moscow so that Napoleon cannot winter there. And his army is not supplied for winter in Russia. And so they have to start moving back They cannot stay there. And that then is when Russia is going to attack, and Tsar Alexander is now going to have his army go at Napoleon 120%. And that is what they do. They start striking at Napoleon when the weather is getting really cold and the snow is coming in, and they just keep hitting him, hitting him, hitting him. And so the French are getting taken out by weather, by freezing cold conditions, and they're getting taken out by the Russians and these attacks that they're launching against them. The French troops retreat with 40,000 troops surviving. 500,000 will die during this campaign. This is a costly blunder. One of the biggest blunders that you can see in history. Anyway, um, Europeans are going to now form a large coalition now that they see that Napoleon is kind of, limping back to France. And Napoleon does have extra troops come out and meet him. But now the fighting is going to be in what is present day Germany. Napoleon does defeat some of these allies in a coalition at a Battle of Dresden. However, at the Battle of Nations outside of Leipzig, Napoleon is going to be defeated, and he is going to be forced to abdicate his throne in March of 1814, and he's going to be exiled to the island of Elba. But Europe's going to be kind of nice to him, this coalition. They're going to say, "You're now the king of Elba. You can go have fun there." We then have this quadruple alliance. Great Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia meet at what is called the Congress of Vienna to draw up new borders and to kind of fix the politics of Europe after the reign of Napoleon. Because what Napoleon has done, whenever he went in and took a territory, he stuck one of his family members on the throne. For example, Joseph in Spain. So they go in and they establish the Kingdom of the Netherlands. They're not going to have a republic anymore. The House of Orange are now in charge. Prussia and Austria both gained territory west of France and in Italy. Alexander, the first of Russia, reluctantly only got part of Poland. He's like, I burnt down my entire country and I only get a little bit of Poland. What are you talking about here? I had the biggest sacrifice. And the French Bourbon monarchy is restored, with Louis XVIII taking the throne. The reason why we jump to Louis XVIII and not Louis XVII is that they respected that when Louis XVI was beheaded, that his son was still alive at the time, and so they kind of has posthumously given him that title of Louis XVII. France is going to also join in the discussions that are happening at the Congress of Vienna under a guy by the name of Talleyrand, but they're not really going to be having any power there. But here is just the victorious powers celebrating their victory over Napoleon. Now, Napoleon became very bored on Elba, and he sought to reclaim his position because he still had so many supporters in France, and he got on a boat and went back to France and reestablished himself. Louis XVIII, the minute that he found out Napoleon had landed and started to amass people, followers, he ditched the country. He does not want a Louis XVI thing to happen to him. So he ditched, and Napoleon crowned himself the Emperor of France, and immediately goes to war because that Quadruple Alliance and others are all rising up again to stop Napoleon. And so this will now lead to the Battle of Waterloo, which is going to be fought just north of France. And at this point, Great Britain comes in with their great now land general. So we had Lord Horatio Nelson, who was very good, obviously, at the sea battle. But one thing Great Britain had been missing is having a great land general. And so they finally are going to be finding someone that is going to help amass their troops, and they're not going to be alone at their battle. They're also going to be having the Prussians showing up, perfect timing, the Austrians showing up, and yeah, they are going to go at Napoleon, and Napoleon is going to be having a bad day at the Battle of Waterloo because he's going to have very bad hemorrhoids. And so, with the British under the leadership of Sir Wellington and the Austrians and the Prussians show up near the end of the battle, Napoleon doesn't really stand a chance. Napoleon is unable to watch the battlefield because his hemorrhoids are so bad. And yeah, the other forces are just stronger. This is not Napoleon's old Grand Armée. This is a new put together armée. And so Napoleon loses and he is sent into exile once again, where he will remain for the rest of his days in exile down in the South Atlantic seas. So, thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please write them below in the comments section. And thank you very much for listening. Bye.